Hello and welcome to the CX Files for 28th November 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, winging my way back from Europe right now, just leaving Germany, Mark. And it's great to be with you on this podcast as I get into the airplane and prepare to go back to Montreal.
Well, it's great that you're passing through Germany because our guest, Claas van Delden, is from Yoummday and based in Munich. Claas is he's the head of growth and revenue. So, essentially he's the one charged with building the business. And we've had Yoummday on this pod before. I think it was Chris Haig was talking last time. It's an interesting company that's focused on a platform-based approach. So essentially, it's a sort of a gig CX model that they've employed, but they have some interesting clients, and they've got some really interesting sort of focus on what they're doing. And the reason that I got Yoummday back on was because I saw Claas talking about some of the advantages of gig CX in certain specific sort of situations, such as retailers expanding across different markets in Europe, which it's a classic sort of problem that we see with European companies, is that you can start a company in France, then you want to expand into Spain, you need to offer Spanish language service to your customers, which is fine if you've got a reasonable sized market like Spain. But if you're going for a sort of pan-European expansion and you've got to start serving customers in Finland or somewhere that's much smaller, then it can be very risky. Now, traditionally, we've seen the BPO community running multilingual hubs. But I saw Claas just saying, well, why don't you just get the people that you need in those locations? Let them work from home, let them work flexibly, and you can get the language skills that you need, but without any risk. So if Finland doesn't work out, you shut it down in a couple of months. So I thought it was a very interesting take on where are we going with multilingual hubs, really. So I just called him up for a chat about this.
I think you were wise to do so. Look, the reality is that multilingual hubs as a business model, I think are facing some pressure right now. One of the things that we keep hearing about is the extent to which it's becoming very difficult to find the language skills that were otherwise quite straightforward, maybe even 5, 6 years ago, but you're just not getting the same volumes of people in some of the more traditional locations in Europe, potentially even in the European nearshore. So I think that what Klaus is saying, what it makes a lot of sense. It brings a lot of value to a potential client of a BPO or to a captive operator that decides that it wants to virtually host different language speakers. I think, Mark, what you say about the virtual model, whether it's done using a gig version or using the more traditional agent version, there's a lot to it, and especially in terms of sourcing linguistic needs that might be a little bit more niche. I can recall a few years ago a BPO freaking out because they needed something like 24 people to work in a contact center that spoke Danish. And I said to them, you're not going to find these individuals by the way, it was based in the UK. And I said, you're not going to find 24 Danish speakers. They're going to be willing to come into a central location, virtualize it across the UK. You might be able to do it. But the fact of the matter is that these old traditional means and methods are really facing a lot of strain right now. And the track record a guy like Klaus has and that Yoummday has in terms of being able to solve some of these issues with a much more realistic view of the world, a much more proactive way of doing it in a virtualized environment, I think definitely has it definitely has the treads needed.
Yeah, and this speaks to the kind of pairings we often see where the UK can often find agents in other countries because English is so widely spoken. And this is applicable with places like France and Spain, but certainly with the Scandinavian countries, Germany even, it's harder to find German than Spanish, for example. So, it's harder to find many of these languages once you're going outside of that home market. So it's definitely easier to just virtualize some of these. So if you only need 20 people, then just virtualize that entire process. It definitely seems like a very flexible solution to a problem that really changed with the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we certainly saw multilingual hubs were definitely the way to fix this problem. And then suddenly they weren't.
Yeah, exactly. I think things have just moved on, and with moving on means adapting, and those organizations that adapt to the expectations and to the requirements of the labor market will be the ones that are going to have a better time sourcing the quality talent. That's what it comes down to. But I'd love to hear what Claas has to say. So why don't we go to the chat that you had with him and find out a little bit more?
Claas, it's great to get you on the podcast. Now, I know that you're based in Europe, you're based in Germany, and in regions like Europe, there is a need to offer customer service in many different languages. And traditionally, the BPOs have responded to this with multilingual hubs. But your business is focused on more of a sort of a gig approach where you can hire many different people remotely in the markets where they're needed. How does this platform approach differ from what a traditional BPO would offer?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Thanks a lot for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you. Now, Yoummday, we consider ourselves a global CX outsourcing platform, which is structured as a marketplace. So basically, you can think of us as a digital platform covering all the steps of the value chain of a traditional call center. And then as a marketplace, on the one hand side, we currently have about 16,000 talents, as we like to call our agents. And we have about 100 clients that are outsourcing over the platform. And it's basically our job is to connect clients and talents. And mostly we do that through a managed service where our own operations team is taking care of the whole project management. And basically, the advantage of the platform versus the multilingual hub is that it allows you to hire people from anywhere. So even though you have a multilingual hub, you're still sort of limited to one location, or you have to move people from other locations, which is quite expensive. And with Yoummday, you basically can source from all over the world, and that gives you a lot more flexibility. And also, we think access to a much more diverse set of talent. So that's where we see the main advantages.
Okay, and I think that it was either yourself or one of your colleagues, but I saw you talking about one of the advantages of this is that you can try out new languages quite easily and at quite low risk. For example, if you're a French retail brand and you're thinking about expanding into the Scandinavian markets, you can get 10 or 20 people working in Finnish. And if it doesn't work out in 3 months, then you can sort of back out of that. Whereas with a traditional customer service model, you'd have to invest in either the hub or hiring people in that location. I mean, is that right? I mean, that's exactly how flexible it really is.
Absolutely. So that's one of the great advantages of the global freelance workforce. It gives our clients a great deal of flexibility when it comes to scaling up and scaling down. So we typically don't require long-term contractual commitments from our clients. We don't have like commitment or input-based compensation. So with us, you can choose the number of talents you like. You can pay based on actual outputs. So whatever the talents are performing, whether it's a sale, whether it's a ticket that's being solved, that's what you actually pay for. And it's very easy to test. So typically to set up a proof of concept would take less than 4 weeks. And that's typically how we onboard new clients. So we do a POC, and then over time, they find that the model, although it's a little bit different to what they're used to, it works quite well. And then we increase our share of wallet with the client. And one of the advantages that you see, if you look at it from a talent perspective, it's a highly attractive job that we're offering because it's like a 100% work from home job. You can choose who you want to work for. So typically there's a very strong brand affiliation. We don't tell our talents you have to work for brand XYZ, but they choose the brands they love. They get to choose the hours that they work. So they can choose the shifts that they feel comfortable with. And then they also typically earn significantly more than the average call center pay. And because it's a very attractive job, talents are very sticky. So our attrition rates are much lower than what you would see as an industry standard. Unwanted attrition is about 10, 11, 12% on an annual basis. And that's because the talents are very happy with what they do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can remember it's probably about a year ago, Chris Haig was on this podcast talking about Yoummday, and he actually mentioned that the talents generally they work fewer hours than full time. Like you would work, 40 or 45 hours in a full time job, and he was saying because of the kind of output based model, and they're getting paid each time they help a customer. They tend to earn enough for the week, and then they don't carry on with the hours. They prefer to have a more flexible life and work fewer hours rather than just carrying on and earning more.
That's correct. So on average, our talents work about 25 hours a week. Still, the platform is their main source of income. So we don't actually think of it as a gig model because gig always sounds a little bit like, this is like a side job and it's not that permanent. Our workforce is working on the platform to make a living, but still on average, it's 25 hours. Now, if there are peaks, if there are certain requirements from the project, we can very easily and fast increase capacity. And that's because it's 100% work from home. We have a pre-trained workforce. And if there are surges, for example, we are working for an airline and they typically see surges in incoming calls due to unforeseen weather events. We can add capacity within a couple of minutes if we have to. So there's a great deal of flexibility. Also, we don't have to stick to rigid shift models. So with Yoummday, it doesn't have to be like 8 hours in a row. We can do 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening if that's when the work needs to be done. And so flexibility is certainly one of the key strengths of the platform.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about the platform-based approach, and you mentioned how it's really like having a hub where you're in the center and you've got 100 or so clients, and on the other side there's 16,000 or so talents. Is there a downside, or can you name any kind of downsides to not just having everyone on the team feeling like they're kind of physically on a team? You know how we see the contact centers make such an effort to get everybody to enjoy their time at work together, and everybody really focuses on that kind of teamwork element. But clearly, when it's a distributed platform with everybody working from home, is something lost there?
So our experience is that actually one of the key strengths of the platform and one of the key things that get mentioned again and again when talking to talents is that they do feel part of a team, but it is a remote team. So it's not for everyone. There are certainly people who prefer to work in an office setting and to have their colleagues by their side. And for them, the platform wouldn't be the right choice. But the freelancers, the entrepreneurs who have chosen to work on the Yoummday platform, they prefer the work from home setting. And because of the technological solutions that we offer, we can make them feel part of the team as of day one. So it starts with the training. It's a remote-only training, but it's highly collaborative. There's a lot of gamification going on. And then there's a permanent buzz in the project chat. The team leads are very well trained in getting people engaged, getting people to help each other out when there are certain, challenges with the work. So to our talents, it really feels like they're being part, not of a Yoummday team, but of the client's team. So that even the identification with the client brand is extremely strong. And from time to time, we do these physical meetings where we bring in a lot of talents and they get to physically meet them. And it's funny that typically you would immediately have teams of talents who work for a particular client, and they would, huddle together and have a beer together because they feel like, even though they've been working remote all the time, they feel like, hey, we're, the Deutsche Telekom team or the Lufthansa team or what have you.
Yeah, and that's interesting then, because you're talking about people who really identify that they're on part of a team, and clearly they feel like they're doing a great job. But when I've talked about the Yoummday model to traditional BPOs, the first thing they say is, they can't handle complex problems or complex customer questions, whereas we can invest in deep training and deep knowledge with our agents. So how would you sort of answer that type of that point?
Actually, our experience is it's the other way around. So we handle programs that have up to 8 weeks of training time, where talents have to handle up to 15 different client systems. So really complex work. And we also, in a lot of programs, we are being benchmarked against traditional BPOs. And for example, in sales, where common sense is, sales, you need to be in a room together, you need to have that team spirit. We see that our teams can outperform the traditional BPO teams because we have a completely different incentive structure. Our talents are entrepreneurs. They get paid for performance. They only get paid for performance. So it's really competitive. And so we don't see that. And by the way, if you look at the composition of our workforce, because of the fact that it's a highly attractive job, our average talent is about 42 years old. They have about 15 years of prior work experience, and 50% of them have a higher education degree. So it's a highly qualified workforce. And we think with automation increasing more and more, the work that requires human interaction and the human touch is the more complex work. And we think with the workforce that we have, we are very well prepared to handle exactly that kind of complex work that will remain to be handled by humans in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the outbound sales, because I think that really we'd only been focusing on customer service, but I guess quite often companies are going to companies like your own or to BPOs and asking them to help with outbound sales programs. And I guess there, one of the points you made earlier must actually be quite important, that brand affinity. I mean, if you're actually interested in financial products and insurance, or just as an example, then you're going to be much better at talking to customers about those products, rather than if you just got a job in a contact center and they told you what you need to talk about because they gave you a script.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of cases on the platform that go to prove this point. For example, we have a client that sells calculators and products where you need a mathematical background. And on our platform, we have such a broad diversity of talent that we find a lot of people who both have a mathematical background and have a sales skill. That's a very special skill. We have clients in the tourism industry. They require local knowledge of the agents. The agents should know about the destination sites that people are traveling to. And because of the breadth of the talent pool, we find those people. Even in remote, faraway places, we find those people. There's one famous example, which I'd like to quote. We're doing outbound sales for one Dutch telecommunications company, and one of the best performing talents on the program is actually living in Sao Paulo in Brazil. But it's a Dutch native who finds it difficult to, do anything in Dutch in Brazil, obviously, but through the platform he can do sales work and earn very good money. Yeah, so
that's excellent. That's excellent. And it's interesting because we started off by talking about the issues of language, especially across Europe. And the answer in many customer service solutions now appears to be artificial intelligence and looking at simultaneous translation. I mean, are you doing something similar with tech for languages, or do you feel that this approach of being able to access resource anywhere actually gives you all the skills you need anyway?
Well, we also do offer translation technologies. Currently, we would recommend them only for written work. We think voice is still a little bit too cumbersome. Latency times are still a little bit too high, doesn't feel natural. But we would certainly recommend our clients to also look into those options. And we see actually quite some potential, for example, for clients from Germany or clients from France or from Italy to actually outsource at least a lot of the written work to English-speaking talents, and then use technology to translate back and forth. So that's certainly a scenario that we see coming. Yeah.
Okay. And has AI changed the way that you're doing business, or that you're offering service to customers? I mean, more generally then?
So first of all, we're agnostic when it comes to using technology versus humans. We're really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and to think, what would an ideal process look like? And then parts, especially the easy parts of a conversation, they should probably be automated because there's a clear benefit. The customer can save time. When it's very easy to solve a topic, it can be done automatically. Whereas when you have things which are of a special value or emotional importance to the client, typically they don't want to talk to a bot. And that's when we would recommend to have a human workforce in place. And I think because we're a platform and because we do not have thousands or tens of thousands of people on our payroll, we can be a little bit more of a neutral advisor to our clients when it comes to, what part of the process should be automated versus what part should still remain human. That's basically how we think about it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because just as you were speaking there, I was just thinking that I suppose the tradition within customer service processes, there's been a lot of humans involved in this traditionally. There is a challenge, I suppose, if you looked at the entire customer interaction as like 100%, and people have said, well, maybe automated bots previously could handle 10% of interactions, but now they're starting to get better. So we're looking at more like 40% of interactions can be automated. It seems that as the AI gets better and that number gets higher and higher, the people that you want, the humans that you want still there that are interacting with the customer, they need to be better and better. We're no longer talking about kind of people on minimum hourly wage, just sitting there taking calls. And I guess that kind of plays into what you've talked about, like rewarding people for each time they help a customer, I guess.
Absolutely. So we think going forward, as you say, the easy stuff will be automated. What remains is the more complex tasks, the highly consultative work, and the sales work. Sales also typically doesn't work very well when it's automated. And for that, you need a very specialized and skilled workforce. And because of the fact that we can offer very attractive job profile, we can offer that workforce. That's certainly the case. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just to wrap up then, we're talking in November 24. There's just about a month or so left of the year. Certainly 25 is looking quite exciting, because I think that we've seen an evolution really over the past couple of years since the AI started becoming more important. But what have you got going on as we're entering into the new year? Are there any exciting projects that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our AI is a major area of investment for us as well. We've just recently launched a product which is called Fluent AI, which does language assessments of talents in order to make sure that they have the right skill for a certain project. We do have our own AI features on the platform, AI Assist, something we call Smart Replies, which is basically an LLM that can generate text-based answers. We do have an auto QA feature, which lets you monitor 100% of the calls to make sure that the quality is right. So there's lots of stuff going on. But if I take a step back and take a little bit of a broader perspective, I think what we've seen in the past 12, 18 months is a very strong focus of the discussion on technology and what can technology do. Can we automate this? Can we automate that? And we think what was a little bit lacking was the focus on the customer, because not everything that can be automated should be automated. And still the overwhelming majority of the customers, they don't want to talk to bots. And therefore, we think that in 2025, hopefully we will get back to that perspective of the customer, which lets us define the processes really from what would a great customer experience look like, instead of what can technology theoretically do in order to save costs, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's a great summary and a positive message to end on. So, Claas, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.